to allow all attendees to...
Good afternoon and welcome to the CAD-1 BD Mackey Consulting Detailing in Revit Part 2. Today we have Brian Mackey from BD Mackey Consulting who will be on the keyboards, and my name is Stan Henney with Business Development Manager here at CAD-1. We're pleased to be able to bring you these webinars and hopefully give you a little insight into some of the questions that come up for you in your day-to-day workings. So before we get started, there's a lot of folks on here today, and many of you I haven't seen your names on our webinars before, so just give you a little ground school here. Hopefully you're hearing us already, so the mic and speakers versus telephone thing is not necessary, but if it is, try those. One of the most important is to minimize the console, hit the orange arrow, and then that'll get that pesky thing out of the way. And you can raise your hand. I'm never sure what this is used for, but you can raise your hand if you want to, virtually. And the most important thing there is if you do have questions, please feel free to ask them. Type them in the question box, and we will try to answer them as close to in context as we can. And so with that, today's Revit detailing, you'll see in the grayed out areas, the kind of the light grayed out areas, those were the items in Revit Detailing Part 1. Part 2, we did this earlier in the year, and unfortunately the recording mechanism didn't work, so we are repeating it to some degree. So Revit Detailing Part 1 should be on our CAD-1 YouTube page. And are you posting it on any of your sites?
I am not right
at this point, Brian. Okay. Look for it on the CAD-1 YouTube page. We do have links on our CAD-1 site under events and then archives, and that's where the webinars are all archived. CAD-1 events archives. So today's presentation will be on creating detail components and creating custom tags, and then the next or the last session will be on nested detail components and creating standard detail assembly. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian, and we'll go ahead and get started.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Revit, because last time we did talk about how to detail, and for those of you who attended it, you heard me say a lot of times, I very rarely use a line, I very rarely use text. 99, probably 0.5% of the details when I do are all detail components and text. So we thought we'd get in here and start showing you, well, how can we start creating these detail components? How can we use those detail components inside of it? And then maybe creating custom tags to do what we wanted to do. The nice part about this is, if the very first thing you want to start with is doing the detail tags, that's something that you can start using right out of the box, because, let me say that, that's something you can start with right away, so you can use the out-of-the-box detail components. Because all of the out-of-the-box Autodesk components do have the capability to take advantage of doing it intelligently, just that intelligence may or may not be inserted inside of there. So I'm going to start off with just by opening an out-of-the-box Revit detail component family, just so we can get into and start talking about what's going on with that there. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up a family. I'm going to go to the out-of-the-box Autodesk, and I'm going to go to Detail Items, and we'll just pick something like a concrete masonry unit. That sounds fabulous to me. So we'll just go grab the 2 core section, and we'll open this up. So the one thing I always like to point out to people is in the out-of-the-box detail components, last time I checked, which was actually a couple of releases ago, there were over 600 detail component families inside of there. So think about that. Take that into consideration. It's a great point to get you started on what you're doing. That's how I got started and realized how intelligent, how great the detail components can be and what potential they had. But the one thing I'm talking about is, so if you start looking at these detail components, they still, in their properties, or in this case their family types, are going to have keynotes associated to them. So out-of-the-box Autodesk detail components have keynoting associated to them. But what I was showing in the last presentation is how you can use keynoting or type comments. So the thing I always like to show everybody is you can start editing the out-of-the-box families. I usually do a save as and then put it somewhere else. But I can start adding information inside of here. CMU block, or I call it total of block, which it's not technically called, and I understand that. So a couple tips I like to show people is when you get into this family, you might have a ton of different sizes. If you really want to get specific to each one of those sizes, like, ooh, I wanted to come in here and actually in the type comment say CMU 8 by 8 by 8, I could go through here in each one of these and start changing the value of that. Maybe this was going to be CMU 10 by 8 by 16. And we could go start filling those type comments out for each individual element if that's what you're looking for. And most of the time, that is what I'm looking for. But if you're an architect or an engineer and you're going to put a detail component in that's somebody else's property, so if I'm an architect and I want to say, hey, this is CMU RE structural, or if I'm a structural engineer and I want to say, hey, this is wall RE architect, what's kind of nice about the type comments and the families is if you want them all to say the same thing, a lot of people don't know this little tip. So you can just start off with, in the formula field, with parentheses, so if you, or not parentheses, excuse me, with quotation marks. So if I wanted every single one of these blocks to say CMU RE struct, I can absolutely do this. I'm just going to put in quotes CMU RE struct. You're going to see that graded out, and the beautiful part about this is, as I switch to any one of those files, it's going to still say the exact same thing. So it's not like I have to go through and type in CMU RE struct for the 20 different types inside of this family. I can just go ahead and say, okay, CMU RE struct, put it in quotes, put it in the formula column, boom, there we go, and it's going to be done. If I hit apply, it's going to apply that to all of the ones inside the family, and then the nice part is now I can delete that, so if it needs to be customized inside of the project, a person will be able to customize that. I'm going to actually undo that for a second. I'm going to put that back in there. I'm not going to say undo because I'm inside of the dialog box. I can't undo. So I'm going to go back and put the CMU RE struct in here and just show you how now we can load this into the project and have that information there. So I'll load this family into my project. We'll go create a drafting view so we're not dealing with working in this large floor plan. Okay, so now I've got this nice drafting view set up, and you'll see that if I grab this object and go to edit type, since I had that in the formula field, I cannot change what this is going to be. If I was to duplicate this and maybe create a CMU veneer and it's going to be like 2 inches thick or something like that, I didn't want to have to retype everything. So if I want to come in here and just change this to be a 2 by 8 by 8, and then I want to go, oh, there already is a 2 by 8 by 8. All right, we'll duplicate this and just create it something different. And I want to come in here and change this to be something different. You'll see that that value is still going to be there. So anytime in the project somebody duplicates this family, creates a new version, it's always going to say CMU RE struct. It's grayed out, it's locked, it's controlled by a formula. So sometimes you might not want that to happen. So I use that tip to get it to fill out all of those values for me. But then what I'm going to do is just delete it out of here, reload this into my project, tell Revit to override it. I don't need to override any of the values. I didn't change any values. But now you'll see that when I go to my type properties, I can change what's going on with those values. So depending on if you want to kind of lock it down in your office and make it so people can't change it, you can put that in the formula field. You can use the formula field just to help you start along with the type comments and do what's going on inside of there. So when we start getting into this, now we're using detail components. I showed this in detailing part 1. Now it's going to be about grabbing the information to tag it. So we did show on the previous one how you can do one tag by keynoting or another tag by using the type comments /comments. So we go to my annotate, and we're just going to show real quick. We can go do an element keynote at this point in time because now if I just keynote this object, there's my element keynote. You can change that keynote to be the numbers or the numbers and the text. So I think they have, in this case, the out of the box just has text, numbers and text. Just numbers, but they don't have text only. So, or excuse me, they don't have numbers and text. So you can see you've got the number, you've got the text, but you don't have number and text, depending on what you're looking for inside of there. The other thing that I showed, and I was really kind of pushing towards the last time, because how I like to do it, is I was doing a tag by category. Well, if we were to come over here and tag this, out of the box, they don't have a detail item tag set up for you. If we were to go grab this detail item tag from the out-of-the-box annotations, what it's actually looking for is not the type comments. So the out-of-the-box detail item tag is simply looking to the type mark. And that's not what I'm really going to do. So let's start off on how can we create a custom tag to really start taking advantage of things that we were getting into in the past. So created a custom annotation tag. I'm going to go up to my application menu, and I'm on a different network today, so my application menu is hanging on me. But we'll go in here and we'll say I'm going to go create a new, and I'll try to hit the flyout this time. The new annotation symbol. It really doesn't matter if you click annotation symbol or family. If you click annotation symbol, all it does is take you to the annotations directory. So you can go a new annotation symbol, or you can say new family. Doesn't really matter. You just need to get to the annotations directory. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to come in here and grab the generic tag, because that's actually what we're going to be doing, is tagging an element. And whenever you get into any Revit family, you're going to see there's always the two reference planes. These reference planes are the insertion point of any family. Where they cross, that's your insertion point. When you get into a tag, they're actually coming in here and telling you you need to change the family categories and parameters to tell this tag what it's going to be tagging. So they're telling you in the properties here, come into, and it doesn't make any sense because you really don't use the properties. That was old school. What we need to do is come up to this properties panel and hit the family categories and parameters dialog. So I'll go ahead and open up the properties panel, family categories and parameters, and I will grab and say it's going to be tagging detail items. So not a big deal. We're going to be tagging detail items, and the reason we have to do that is Revit then needs to understand what is going on with the information. Are we tagging, widths of doors, rough openings of doors, etc.? So since we say it's a detail item, it's going to give us the properties out of the box to detail items that those can start dealing with. So it also tells you the insertion points at the reference planes, and always remember to delete the note, which I forget 90% of the time. So once that's done, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and create a label. So I'm going to go up to my ribbon, grab the label command. You could choose the correct label height of text that you want to do. I'm okay with 3/32. I really don't like these labels to be left justified or center and middle justified. I like it to be left justified and center. So I'm going to go and switch my orientation to left and center. I'm going to attempt to somewhere closely pick around the intersection. I don't really care because I'm going to come back and fix that. And then what we're going to do is what information do we want to be tagging on detail components. So what I like to do is add those type comments. Hey, this is an 8x8 block. This is a L angle 3x3, whatever that's going to be. And then once I get the type comments, I usually like to grab the comments as well. So this is where I was showing in the past where I could go in and say, okay, here's a piece of 5/8" gypsum board, but I want to say 2 layers or each side on that component. I can individually comment different components. So I'm going to come in here and do this, and I don't usually like this big long narrative, so we'll talk about that in a little bit, but I'll leave it for now. So it's telling me this is a sample type comment, this is a sample comment. Like I said, I always come back and fix this because I'm a little bit OCD about certain things, so I want to just try to nudge this down to get that grip for the label roughly centered on that reference plane, so you can move in, zoom in as much as you want to get that about where you think it's centered, to try to get it closely, centered on that text, on the insertion point.
And Brian, speaking of OCD, Juliana asks, can you figure out a way to disable the double click for annotation tags because it's annoying?
It's not for annotation tags. What Juliana is actually talking about in Revit 2013, according to Autodesk, users had requested the capability to double click a family to go into the family editor. So sure, if I double click on a door, it's going to take me to edit the door family. Okay, possibly I might want that. Never would. But what it really stinks is when you are trying to edit a tag, like a title block even, you click on the title block to edit the page name, and all of a sudden you're editing the title block family. 2013, they added a double click to that. I know on Vasari Talk this morning, people were complaining about it in Vasari Talk. So hopefully we'll start to see them come in with a way to disable that in 2014. I don't think they're going to do anything with that in 2013, unfortunately. So to my knowledge, no, there is not a way for that to happen. Okay, so I've created this tag. I'm going to go ahead and just do a save as, or a save on this. I really need to stop hitting the application menu since it keeps hanging. So I'm going to go ahead and do a save as. I'm going to save it as a family. I could have just hit save if I'd have been smart. I'm just going to dump this on my desktop, and I'm going to call this a detail tag. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. So now I'll go ahead and load this into my project, and I'll say OK. And so now when I come over here to tag this, you're going to see that as I'm tagging this component, that tag is displaying to me, hey, look, I'm grabbing my type comments. Probably go make this a free end, and then I can actually move it around and give it an elbow and have some fun with it. But now it's just grabbing that type comment. So no matter how many times I use this in the project, not even just in this view, but in the project, I can use this a whole lot of times. And each time I tag it, it's all going to come up and say CMU, RE-struct, CMU, RE-struct, etc. But what if I wanted to go into one of these and come in here and say, hey, you know what? I really wanted to turn the mortar visibility off on this, and so I needed to add a comment on that CMU where it's saying, oh, you know what, there's no mortar in this family, so I want to say leave unmortared at lintel or something crazy. I don't know, making this up as I go. So what I like to do is, since that tag was also grabbing the comments, now I can say leave mortar out at lintel. And since I've added that to the comments, it is only picking up on that information on this one object. These are all still having that same scenario or the same type comments. They're not picking up on the comments that are inside of there. And if I start to wanted to, as Juliana had asked, I can actually try to click this, and you'll notice that I clicked the family, waited a second, and then clicked it again to go in to edit it. I didn't do it all right away. I can actually see what that is right here in the value of the tag too. So I can add more information to see how far this is going to go in the, how far this is wrapping. So again, I added that information here, but what that truly did is went back to the properties and added that into the comments of my family. So two different ways to do that. So one question always comes up among people, well, what if I wanted that too fat or I wanted to adjust it? Unfortunately, the tags can't be adjusted in width in Revit products. So I'd have to go into and create a wide family, a narrow family, or whatever we're looking at doing there. So it's one simple thing to go through and start creating those tags to start matching what you're doing with your families. So that's the thing I always try to get people to start with, is there are over 600 families out of the box, and that's family components. You know, if you think parametrically, you have an infinite amount of families out of the box. Yes, you're not going to be using a lot of those depending on your discipline. If I'm a structural engineer, I'm probably not going to use the door detail components. If I'm a structural engineer, I might not be using detail components, mechanical type scenarios. But you know, there's usually considerable amount of detail component families out of the box that you can use. The one thing I usually try to tell everybody is, you know, go to the library where that's at, and I really don't feel like searching there, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to do a Brian cheat here, and I'm going to say load family, and I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to, oh, that's right, I can't do this in here. So it's pre-programmed data, Autodesk 2013 libraries, Imperial. So I'm going to come down here and go to C, program data, Autodesk, Revit 2013. I'm blind.
Not really.
There it is. Libraries and US Imperial. Detail components. So the one thing I always try to tell everybody is spend some time in here seeing what detail component files, families are inside of there. Because if I go look at the properties of this, we'll see how many are in 2013. There's 665 files in there. Granted, some of those are probably type catalogs, but there's quite a few Revit components inside of there. A lot of times people get tired of double-clicking through the Autodesk folder structure, so my other little tip is just do a search for *.rfa, and then it'll just go through and list all of those components inside of there. So you have 605 detail components out of the box, and now you can just kind of start coming through here and saying, gee, look, there's bolts, there's ACES shapes, there's all this different stuff inside of here to start going through. You can do thumbnail images if you want to. You can see the images down here. But really dig into what you have out of the box.
I think the myth lives on with so many things. And, you know, you can't detail in Revit is still floating around out there. And it's really not at all true anymore. There's plenty of things to start with. There's plenty of ways to create very adequate details. So, you know, there's no need to live with that notion anymore.
So that's creating detail tag. We said we were going to get to that today. So let's really start getting into, okay, now how can I take advantage of creating those detail components? I know my whole last presentation was all about here's custom detail components, here's custom detail components, because over the 7 years that I've been dealing with Revit, I've been building up that library and working with those, because not that there's anything wrong with the out-of-the-box ones, I just wanted more. So I'm going to go in here again, I'm going to say new family. And this time I'm going to start with a detail item. And you're going to notice there are two different detail item templates. There's a detail item, and there's a detail item that's going to be line-based. I'm going to start off with detail item, and I'm just going to say open. And I want to talk about doing something extremely simple that a lot of people fail to understand, because they're thinking, man, I'm creating a Revit family. It needs to be all crazy, parameterized, geeked out kind of family. So let's just say in this project, I know I'm going to be dealing with a parametric cap or something over that 8x8 block. Well, what I like to show people is you can start inside the family working, or what you can also do is go back to your project and start drawing detail lines inside of the project. So we're just going to say we wanted to come in here with a fancy parametric cap, and by fancy, that's way overstated for what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my Annotate tab. I'm going to start creating detail lines. You could choose what line type you want, but for this demonstration, it's not really going to matter. And let's just say I know I wanted to come out of here, and I like using my offsets when I'm working on this stuff. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to start, and my line's going to be 1/8 of an inch away. And I want to go down 1.5 inches, right? And then from there, I should turn my chain on. I'm going to get rid of the offset because I didn't have the chain on. And I'm just going to come straight down from there, like, 15-degree angle, whatever, and make this 1/2 of an inch long. 0.5 of an inch. Oh, I'm still up in the offset dialog. I hate it when I do that. So try that again. We'll click in here, come down, and we'll just draw it that big, right? So then I want to come down, and I would usually be a little bit more accurate on this. I think you guys will get the point. I'm coming up here, and we're going to have a parametric cap that does this because it's just so beautiful, right? And then I'm going to grab these lines here, and I'm going to mirror them to the other side. And then I'll just trim this up. So not very fancy. I'm just doing very simple lines inside of here. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take all of those lines, because in this project, I'm going to use this parametric cap detail, 1522 different details, and I still want to be able to tag and have the intelligent information to it. So I'm going to select all those lines I've drawn, and I'm just going to go up and copy these to the clipboard. Then once those are copied to the clipboard, I'm going to go into my family that I'm starting, and I'm just going to go paste those from the clipboard inside of here. So I'll go ahead and paste these inside of here, and we're going to be able to start really seeing what's going on with this inside of here. Now usually I will draw a line back in the project, so I'm going to undo this for a second, because a lot of times what I'll do is I'll draw a line in the project where I want the insertion point to be. So I'll pick a line off of the midpoint of this, so that way when I place this parametric cap, I'll know that's the insertion point, and I have somewhere consistent to do it. If maybe you're thinking that that's not the best point, maybe the front face of this CMU makes more sense, great. Just I draw a line usually to give me that insertion point. So I'll go back, copy this to the clipboard. I will go back into my project, or my family, excuse me, and I will paste this from clipboard. And now the reason I copied that line is I can go ahead and move that point to the insertion point of the object. So I'll go move that to my intersection and then delete that line to be done with it. So very simple, copied it from the project, pasted it into here. Usually I cut it from the project, but so now that this is pasted in, what I can do is start selecting the lines. And one complaint I always hear in Revit is, well, when you're detailing, you can't use P-lines. I like P-lines in AutoCAD, my polylines, because then I could just select the whole line at once and change it. Well, in Revit, we have the tab command, so we can cycle through. I'm going to grab all of those lines. You know what? Maybe I'm going to say I don't want those as detail item lines. I want those to be light lines. We'll change this to be like 3/4, oops, not 3/4, 1.5 inches, because that's what my detail is going to be in, just to give me a better feel for the line weights. And then I'm going to grab these 4 lines over here using my control key, and you know what? I'm just going to make those heavy lines. Ooh, that's too heavy. I'm going to make those medium lines. You know, for me, that's going to represent the clip. But for my parapet, I really like to, offset it 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, whatever. So I'm going to use my offset command. I'm going to set this up to be offsetting 1/16 of an inch. And again, using that tab key, I can hover over one line, tab, and offset them all at the same time. So again, getting by that, oh, Revit's terrible about detailing because you can't grab all the lines, and doing all of that information takes forever to do. No, it's pretty easy. It's not much different than AutoCAD. And I'm just going to go connect my endpoints over here, these two things, because I kind of like those to be solid, or look like it's a solid element. There's my family. So not a big deal. I've got this family created. But now what I'm going to do, again, is go start either adding a keynote, if you're a keynote kind of person, or adding my type comments. So when I load this in, perfect cap. Let's add a little bit more parametric clap with face clips. Face clip system. All right, whatever you want that type comment to be, you get that set up. So you add your type comments, you get what you want it to do. We'll save this file. I'm going to have a lot of stuff on my desktop. Revit cap. I don't like backups, so I'll give it one backup. And now I can go ahead and load this into my project, load it into project 3. And now you'll notice that, okay, we'll escape that for a second. I'll delete all of these crazy lines that are inside of here. And now I'll just go place that detail component. My insertion point is where I had the intersection of those reference planes. So if I was using this in 15, 20, 30 different details, I now have that very simplistic detail component that is still going to have intelligence to it, so I don't have to sit there each time and go through and call out parametric cap with face clips in every single detail I do. I can just tag it. So nice little way to go through. As you're detailing, you're not going to have all of the detail components you need, and especially on projects, you're going to have project-specific detail components. How are we going to go through and deal with the project-specific? If they never need to flex, you create an extremely simple one like that. Okay? So what if I wanted one to be a little bit more parametric than that? And I'm going to close some of these other crazy families I have open. So I want this to be a little bit more parametric, or what about the waterproofing sheet membrane or anything like that? So the next family I'm going to go create is going to be a line-based family. So what a line-based family is similar to drawing a wall or drawing a beam or drawing a piece of duct. What I'm going to do is create something that basically will be a family from point A to point B. I pick my first point, I pick my second point. It will go through and do that. So I'm going to grab my detail item line-based. I'm going to say, go ahead and say open to that. And this is going to be the most complicated family you will probably ever create. And that's sarcasm. So in this family, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go draw a line. I'm going to choose the line weight I want. You know what? And if there's not a line type you want, to do those inside of a family, you go to your Manage tab. You go to the Object Styles, and you create actually a new object style. I'm going to go ahead and call this one Medium Hidden. We'll call it Medium Dashed. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and give it the same line weight of 3, but this time I want a line type of dash. Say OK. So I've got this new medium dash line type. I need to go tell Revit to use that line type. I'm going to then simply just draw on top of the reference line that's there and then padlock it. So I'm padlocking the start point. I'm padlocking it to the location. Then I'm going to go grab my align command and padlock the end point of that line to the right reference plane. This is all I'm going to do. Single line, done, here we go. Now I'm going to go create some types. So we'll go ahead and call this one building paper. We'll go ahead and add a new family type called sheet waterproofing. We'll go ahead and add a new one called fluid applied. If I could type membrane, etc., etc. Okay, so we'll go through and set those up, and then basically what we're going to be doing is adding the comment that we would want for tagging purposes. So there's my fluid applied membrane. You would probably get into more comments than I would. And by the way, I don't know if anybody noticed that. It's really weird. The type comments are down towards the bottom until you fill them out. Then they instantly move to the top. I don't know how many times I've been in a family, I click the second one, start adding it, and I keep adding text in all the keynotes, realizing that I'm totally breaking what's going on with that. Sweet. All right. So then when I get done with this family, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this family. Again, I'm going to trash my desktop, and I'm going to call this one line-based. I'm going to call it line, medium, dash. I'm not really getting into what this line, medium, dash is going to be because I can just, in a project, edit, type, duplicate, and pretty much give it as many of those as I'm going to want on that. That's the one. So we'll save this. We'll load this into the project. And now what's great about this is I want to kind of show that sheet waterproofing coming down, maybe going up over the top. Again, I'm going to go ahead and give myself an 1/8 of an inch offset. I'm going to turn my chain on, and I'm just going to show it's coming, you know, like up over the top of this. Spacebar flips it if you're using the offset. Go over here to the end point here. Come on down to here, and then we're going to pretend there's a roof modeled in here and go over here at the roof. I'm going to set this to 3 inches. So now you can kind of see what's going on. One downside of doing this the way that I was doing it with the membrane layers like this with chain, if you use the offset, they don't clean up automatically like a normal line would, which is kind of a drag, but I do have to come back and I can use my trim extend corners and get all of these to trim extend inside of there. Same scenario down here. But again, now the beauty part of this is I can still tag it. So if I go tag this line, that's paper. So very simplistic, oh, hey, let's grab the building paper, let's start using that. Maybe getting into the fact of, oh, well, what if this shouldn't be building paper, I wanted to switch these all to be sheet membrane or whatever. I can now grab this line-based family and say, ooh, that's sheet waterproofing. And as I change the line type out, the type comments are going to update with it. So it's a nice little way to go through and set that up. So personally for me, I have like, you know, medium line, thin line, heavy line, dashed medium, dashed heavy, dashed thin, and those are family types I have. Because if I wanted to get inside of here and talk about, you know, elastomeric membrane, EPDM, and I don't have that, what's great about this is I can just grab this family, come in here and edit type and duplicate it, give it an EPDM, change my comments to elasto. I'm getting courageous here trying to figure out how to spell elastomeric.
Especially after 2 hours of Revit radio just now.
Elastomeric, yeah, membrane. And I know that's probably spelled wrong, but whatever. Elastomeric membrane, and as I change it, I edit type, I duplicate it, I now have a new one to be spelled incorrectly if it is. It doesn't look right, but so now it's consistently spelled throughout the entire project. And that's one of those things that you want to get into that's really nice is somebody comes back and says, uh-oh, why did you call that elastomeric membrane? We want that just to be EPDM. Well, all you have to do is find the family either in the project or in the family browser. I can grab the EPDM, go to its type properties, and say, oh, we just wanted to call it out by its acronym. And just by simply changing this, if that detail component had been used 500 times inside of your project, you just updated all 500 details.
There you go. We just paid for your hour on this webinar right here.
There you go. So we're making you more productive and more billable as you go through and set this up. So that's really where we can start getting into, okay, here's how we can get this set up. Here's how we can start getting into intelligent 2D detail components. Now let's take that one step further. Let's start talking about other line-based type families. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab some of my families for this one. So when we were inside doing the detailing part one, we were really getting into talking about, you know, line-based families. How can I do this? What can be set up? So you'll see that I use a lot of line-based families when we get inside of here. So trying to, we'll just go to Division 9. So like for plywood section or my earth or anything else that I'm really pretty much getting into, I've got all of these different detail components created. So I'm going to load my plywood into my project. I'm then going to put a piece of plywood underneath here, and it's probably not going to be, uh-oh, there it is, my FRT plywood. So now, again, it's a line-based family. It's not much more complicated than before. We'll go ahead and put an 1/8 inch offset in again, and I'll pick right here. If it's to the wrong side, spacebar flips it, and that needs to be a -1/8 of an inch offset. So now I can just come across here and draw this line-based family. I think I have an issue with this family. Oh, no. Oh, there's hatch pattern in there, so I don't know why it's not displaying. I'm going to have to look at this one. But I've got that line-based family working inside of there. Again, now I can go ahead and tag this object, get it doing what I want it to do, and all of that information is starting to come into play. So what I like to do, and this is honestly how I kind of started, I went and started a line-based family from scratch, and then I just kept doing save as. When I started, I actually started with gypsum wallboard. So I'm going to go grab my gypsum wallboard family. I'm going to go ahead and open this family. Which, by the way, I don't know if anybody noticed, and I do have this on my blog, how come last time when I drug that family in, it allowed me to start placing it, and this time when I drug the family in, it started loading? Depends on where you drag it. If you take a family and drag it onto the screen, and there's only one family, it will allow you to start placing that family. If you take the family and drag it into the project browser, it will actually just load the family for you. If you drag it into the ribbon, it will open the family for you. So if you didn't catch all that, that is on my blog. Depends on where you start dragging it. So I'm going to go turn all the reference planes on, etc., inside of here. And you're going to notice that this family is a little bit different than what you had with the out-of-the-box gypsum wallboard family. Because so many times when I get into a project, I want to be able to control the end angle. At 15-degree inside angle, I want my plywood mitered, I want my concrete mitered. I want it all to clean up and look nice and pretty. So what I've done inside of here is created angles for the start and the end of this object. So I can come down here and adjust the angles, and it's going to allow me to have angles inside of there. You'll also see that I've got like start line and end line visibility checks, because I wanted to sometimes be able to turn the line off at the beginning or at the end, because I don't want to see those if I'm mitering it. I just want it to be a clean join, but I don't really want to see the join. So we'll cover this. I want to throw this into my project so you guys can all kind of see the benefits of this. And we're going to put, for whatever reason, because I'm insane, we're going to put gypsum wallboard underneath that object. So here's my gypsum wallboard family. And you'll see what I was talking about is, let's say I then wanted to create another one that's coming down from here like this. Oh, let's put it at an angle, because it's just no fun straight. Let's come in here and throw this in at an angle. So that's not really what I'm looking for. So you'll see inside of this, the reason I have that is now I can come in here and say I wanted a 30-degree angle on that one. Now it's lined up. It's looking pretty good. I can grab the other one if I wanted to be true to form and put a 30-degree angle on that one, but it's not always needed. But now that that's done, I don't want a miter line there, so I can turn that start line off. So now it looks like this nice, clean, pretty join going inside of there. And if this was just randomly running off into space, I could also turn the end line off. So just kind of representing it's continuous and going on. The other thing on that, and we're using shaft liner here. I'm really doing great detail. I honestly do know how to detail. The other thing that a lot of times I know people like to see is they like to have that fat line inside of there. So as it's on the exterior side of the building or whatever you want to have inside of there, let's put this on the fat line. You know, I've added another line type that's got a visibility to give that to us. But I don't always want the fat line, because what if I have two separate pieces of gypsum board next to each other? I really don't want a fat line between the two pieces of gypsum board, so I'm going to go ahead, and I should be on the same family type. I don't need the fat line here. So you can see as I set that up, as I start working, it gives me that capability to go through and have those objects inside of there. So how did I do all that? How was that created? Well, it is basically created with a line-based family. So I'm going to, again, go wait for my application menu to hang for a few seconds. Start a new line-based family. So new family, detail component, detail item, line-based. They used to be called detail components. Anybody notice that slight change in 2013? They call them detail components, but they've actually renamed them to detail items, which matches the tag name. So same scenario that we had. So to create this detail component, again, I kind of started with this family. The first thing I wanted to have were the angles. So for me, I'm just going to go turn this reference line off for a second, because I need to start the angles from the reference plane intersection. So on my home tab, I'm going to go do a reference line, and I'm going to go from that intersection down to here. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to do another one from this intersection here over to here. Two of the key things to this is, once I get those done, one of the key things is to make sure that that reference is not a reference. Because if I left it this long and had something that's only like 1/4 of an inch wide, then it's going to be like able to be selected when it's really large and all the way out there. So I'm going to go make those reference lines not a reference. But then I need to be able to control the start point of this reference line. So I'm going to go ahead in my Modify tab and grab my Align key. I'm going to align the endpoint to both reference planes. And I'm going to do that for each one of those reference line endpoints. Okay? So I've got those aligned. If I grab them, I can see they're padlocked. And if I grab it, I can see it's padlocked. So they're all padlocked, looking good. And now I'm just simply going to go in and do an angular dimension. I like to go from here and from here. A lot of people tell me they'd like rather to go this direction, so if I say 30 degrees, it's always 30 degrees in. Mine, or if I say 30 degree on the start, it goes in. On the other one, it goes out. So that's just, how you want to do it, how it's set up for you. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go create angle parameters for this. I'm going to go ahead and add this in here. I'm going to call it start, angle start. It's going to be an angle parameter, and I'll leave it grouped under dimensions. This I do want an instance-based parameter, and I'll go add another one, angle end. By the way, you guys don't see my mouse moving here, so I'm using the tab key a lot as I'm getting into this and typing. So I can just use the tab key and the arrow keys to do everything, because I really don't like taking my hand back and forth from the mouse to the beginning, etc. So I've got that set up. So now we'll grab this dimension and say, hey, this is my angle start. And we'll grab this dimension and say, this is my angle end. And then, of course, with Revit families, we're always going through and flexing it. So I'll go back and make those probably a little bit better of a number than some crazy weird. Doesn't really matter. Okay, they're both working fabulously. So now that's done for this line-based object. I'm going to need to be thinking about like a thickness. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a reference plane. So we'll draw a reference plane. I'm going to take this reference plane and dimension it. So I'm going to dimension from here to here. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab this. And you can always label your parameters this way. I'm going to go ahead and give this one a thick. That will be a type parameter. And then again, I'm going to go back and flex my thickness. So we'll just go make this 1 inch. Okay, so it looks like it's working pretty well. So now that that's done, what we need to do is start creating objects that are going to be constrained to this. So I'm going to go ahead and create a filled region. So I'm going to go do a filled region. I'm going to turn my lines, just draw a line from, and this is where it gets tricky. I don't really want that endpoint. I want the intersection of the two reference planes. So I went in and typed in SI for snap intersection, and then I maybe used the tab key. Because Revit can have issues if you snap to the wrong object. To start thinking it's hosted to this object as opposed to that object, and it can have issues. So I'm going to padlock that. In this case, again, I'm going to go from the intersection of the reference plane and the reference line, padlock it, and then basically I need to trace from here to here. And of course, padlock it, etc. And again, I'm always going from the intersections, getting what I wanted to do there, and hitting that padlock. Okay, so I've got my filled region. We'll just go ahead and make this one gypsum, and we'll finish it out. So again, now that something's been created, something's done, I definitely want to go inside of here and flex it again, make sure if I go change the angles, it's going to update. If I change the thickness, it's going to update. Everything's going to work nicely for me, and it's not going to bust on me. So everything's looking pretty good so far. I'm going to go back and change that one. 90 probably wasn't the best scenario for what I wanted there, because I want to be able to trace the reference line easier than the reference plane. So not a big deal. Pretty simple, straightforward family. But now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back and edit this family, because I realized I forgot to check some things. So I forgot to tell Revit what line weight do I want inside of here. Well, I want the two face lines to be like a medium line. And then I'm going to grab the two end lines and make those two end lines invisible, because I don't want those on right now. And I'll finish that out.
And Linda asks, why was the angled line created as a reference line and not a reference plane?
Good question. Because reference planes, even though this reference plane looks like it has a start point and an end point, it doesn't. It exists indefinitely forever. So you can't constrain an end point of a reference line, or excuse me, a reference plane. So that reference plane, you can try to constrain the endpoint, and it might work for a little bit. Then all of a sudden, you're going to change the rotation. And it's going to start rotating from the center or anywhere else it wants to. Reference lines truly do have a face at the end and a given endpoint. So the endpoints can be constrained. So whenever you're doing anything with an angle, it should always be done as a reference line, not a reference plane. A reference plane will tank on you every time. Might work for a little bit, but it will eventually tank on you. Okay, so now that I've got that done and I've chosen those line weights the way I want, I'm going to temporarily hide the filled region, because now what I need to do is simply draw another line right here that I can control that visibility with. So I'm going to come in here and just go to my Create tab. I'm going to do a line. That should have been a medium line, and I'm just going to go from the intersection again to this intersection, and I'm going to hit the padlock. However, I can't just hit that padlock, because if I just hit that padlock as this rotates, what's controlling the length? So I need to come back and use the align command to align it also to this reference plane. Same thing up here. So I need to constrain it to the reference line for the angle, but the reference planes for the length. And I will do the same thing again, medium line, going from here to here, constrain it to the reference line, align this, constrain it here, and constrain it here. So now those are all good. Again, I'm going to go back and flex it. I'm going to make sure I throw some numbers in. And one of the things that's key to check when you're flexing this, and Revit will freak out a lot of times on this, is take it back to a perpendicular angle. So take it back to a 90, or if you dimensioned it the other way, take it back to 60. And then come back in and move it again back to something else. Because sometimes when you move it back, Revit will say constraints not satisfied. And it somehow reassociates that line with the reference plane as opposed to the reference line. So always check into that and make sure that's happening. And now that that's done, I'm going to basically do the same thing on the face. But again, for me, I like to hide objects as I create them so I don't accidentally constrain to the wrong object. So I'm going to go ahead and do one more line on the face. I'm going to make this one a wide line. And honestly, I do not use the out-of-the-box line types. I've created my own line types like pin 1, pin 2, pin 3, because the out-of-the-box line weights I think are crappy. But that's just my opinion. And we'll constrain that. All right, so we've got that line in there. We've constrained it again. Going and flexing this. What happens if we put it to 90? And then what happens if we move it back to something else? So everything looks like it's working pretty well. So now that all that's working, what I like to do is then put a visibility control. And I think these are very, very beneficial inside of families. So being able to come through here, grabbing this one, going to the visibility or the visible property of that line, and coming here and adding parameter, we'll say start. I can type start line. And I just use the word start line and end line because that's the start point, that's the end point. I took that terminology from Revit Structure. They have a start extension, an end extension, a start offset, an end offset. So I just kind of figured if we're doing it with like beams and trying to keep consistent with the Revit terminology is why I use that scenario. And then this is actually cool. I don't know what release they gave it to us, but they actually gave us a visibility category. This was not there in older releases, and I honestly just noticed this in 2013. I have no idea how long visibility has been there, but I now group my yes-no parameters under visibility, where in the past I'd been grouping everything under graphics. So again, I'll go to the visible parameter here. I'll add a parameter, and I'll just call it inline, group it under visibility, and make it an instance-based property. And then I'll grab the face line, come in here, add another property, call it face line, group it under visibility, and make it instance-based. I hope the GoToMeeting kept up with that because I did do that kind of quickly. So we've got that set up. It's all good to go. I'm going to now go in here and start creating family types. But usually, before I create family types, I'd load this into a project because I actually want to test it out in a project to make sure it's going to work before I send it out into the real world. A lot of times I'll go create family types and something was wrong, or I've got to change a value. Now I've got to change it in 6 or 7 of them, where it's just easier to go ahead and test it first, put it in a project, change the thickness to make sure it's going to, that was 2 inches, make sure it's going to work. You know, hit the apply button. That works great. Go back and change these to 90, make sure they're going to work. What's great about angle values as well in Revit is you can also make it like a -45 to go the other direction. Make this one a 45. It looks like everything's working for me. So I always test these in a sample file just to make sure it's working. And I always like to tell people, make sure that sample file is your company template. I've actually seen families work fine in the out-of-the-box, but it doesn't work in the company template. So we might have a conflict of something. If we do, that's where we really need to kind of get back into this and start saying, oh, okay, there's a conflict. What's wrong with my template? Why does this work in the out-of-the-box? So a lot of times I'll test it in 2 locations. So now that's done, I'll come back to this family. Now basically all I'm going to do in this family, oops, that's my version. I guess I can close this one. Go back into the family and start creating family types. So now I'm just going to create a new type, like 5/8 inch jip. New type, 5/8 inch type X, etc., etc., etc. I'm not going to kill everybody with doing this. Make sure my values are back to 90. You guys are kind of getting the point as you get into it. So just one of those things. That's how I create those line-based families. And what's really cool about this is I now basically have the base of what I want to do inside of here. So now this is the base. So, oh, somebody needs something else like concrete. What's great about doing this as concrete, now all I have to do is basically do a save as, which I didn't save, so I'm not going to do that step. But now all I have to do is take the filled region, change it to be concrete, go change the types. Oh, now I don't want 5/8 type X. Let's go ahead and rename this one and call it 6-inch concrete, 6 inch. Call 6-inch wall. And then we'll grab the other one. I should probably change it to be 6 inches thick, huh? And then we'll go ahead and grab the other one that's called 5/8 jip, and we'll rename this one and call it a 4-inch walk. And change this to be 4 inches. And now the beauty of all of these is I can start coming down inside of here and just changing my type comments. 4-inch walk. Grab my 6-inch wall. Ooh, type comments here, 6-inch concrete wall. All right. So now when I go ahead and load this into my project, I have the capability to say, okay, let me go to my detail component. So annotate, detail component. It's a family 4, but in that family 4, I wanted to grab the 4-inch walk that is concrete. Oops, I forgot to make those values 0 in the family. And then we want to go down another one. It's going to be the 6-inch thick wall. And we can start creating those components. Probably should go make those all 90-degree angles since I forgot. Okay. So one of the other things that I add to most of my component families, and it doesn't matter if it's line-based, non-line-based, whatever, when you're starting to use these in a project, sometimes it's like really nice. Let's just say we were going to, this is a terrible example in this one, but maybe I wanted to have this file inside of here be centered underneath the other one. Well, without having, anything in the middle of the file, I actually have to use the move each time, and I'm constantly grabbing the move command where I really want to be able to align things. I'm a big proponent of align. So the other thing that I will do in a lot of my families is I'll start creating reference planes that I can use for helping align things in the project. I might not ever actually use this. This might not really need to be there. But what I'll do most of the time is I'll have a reference plane that's centered in this file. And I'll always go give that reference plane the center, left, right value in this case. And I also like to label them. You can also see I don't like to type. Oh, I missed it. So Control T that up there, and then just simply do an equal dimension. So give myself a dimension from the center to the inner, equal that. And now when I load this back in the project, and I usually do it the other direction as well, but now when I load this back into the project, if I really wanted to use the align command, it's going to find that center point in the object for me to use the align command. So I was like, ooh, the center needs to line up with its edge. Now I can just use the align command. So that's getting into the basics of creating detail components. What you'll start to see next time when we get into this in detailing part 3, I'll go ahead and open up one of my families. Actually, it is on my 2012. I don't think I've upgraded this one to 13 yet. So one thing that you'll see I'll try to get into here, and this is actually going to be can be for anything. I can talk about door heads, door jambs, headers, whatever we want to do. But the one thing that I have inside of here, which was that? That's the side. I want the section. Space side section. So I have this family here, and so what I brought in is I have a detail component that's just a rebar and section, and then I have one that's being spaced. So next time we're into how to nest families in, to swap families out from one type to the other, because basically what I can start doing is changing the rebar size. It updates things. It swaps the family out for me. Does all these beautiful things and what I needed to do. But I've also added things in there for like spacing through the array parameters. If I come in here and say I want that spacing to be 6 inches, hit the apply button, it truly is doing it. And now for my structural engineers out there, I can actually tag that value because that is a shared parameter. We'll get into that in rebar detailing part 3.
All right, Brian. Well, that's real good. Does anyone out there, let's see, we've got about 5 minutes left on the hour. Does anybody have any questions they want to type in before we bid you farewell?
So hopefully everybody found that beneficial.
Yep.
Try to get in there. This is highly requested. This is probably like the 8th or 9th time I've done this webcast. So it's definitely something that most people have liked. People are starting to pick up on, wow, we really can. We're breaking the old stigma of you can't detail in Revit. It's definitely something that my company offers as a service as well, is convert your CAD details to intelligent Revit details using detail components and tags. Almost no line work or text. I'm not saying you're not going to have text in a simple detail of here's the assembly instructions, but hopefully it'll be good to see what's going on.
And you can certainly contact Brian directly, of course, at one of the two addresses there, or you can contact CAD-1 if you want to get a hold of Brian, or you want to look into, some detailing classes in general, Revit classes in general, so forth and so on. We do record this. We're hoping the recording is going to behave this time.
Yeah, we tried recording the detailing sessions like 3 times, and for some reason we find on every other recording we ever do, but the detailing ones just don't like to be recorded.
So I will tell you that if you go to our website, CAD1.com, and then to the events page and the archives page, you will find the, I think it's headed that way, you will find the archives. Now, I was in there just a bit ago, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that we actually have over to events. There we go, and then the pull down, then archives. Like Bill Clinton.
So part 3 from last year is recorded.
Yeah, part 3 from last year is recorded, and the part 1 that we did in August hasn't been posted yet. So I'll get on somebody about that, and we'll get that posted, and then we'll get part 2 posted as quickly as we can here. So if others want to watch, you can. Let's just kind of look through these, see if there's any.
And if you guys missed any of those things that I mentioned about on my blog, it's speedymackyconsulting.com/blog. You can also just Google the Revit Geek. That is my Twitter handle. So I noticed a couple people said we'll be looking forward to the notice about part 3. I always tweet that information. So if you guys want to follow me on Twitter, it is the Revit Geek. So, or find me, Google me that way as well.
Very good.
Otherwise, we appreciate everybody taking an hour of their valuable billable time away from their office. Hopefully we paid in return by making you more productive in doing details.
And thanks for the nice comments there that are popping up. Appreciate it. So we'll see you next time.